I remember the first ripple because it made the stars tremble. Not metaphorically, literally. Constellations jittered by fractions of degrees, as if reality itself had flinched. I was a junior archivist in the Astral Concordance then, tasked with cataloging deep space anomalies. Most were mundane: collapsed drive wakes, rogue comets, the occasional illicit warp experiment. But this was different. It was clean, deliberate. A single curve of gravitational pressure carving through hyperspace with mathematical precision, like the wake of a leviathan cutting across a still ocean. Our senior analysts dismissed it as natural. No vessel could leave a scar like that. No species could generate that magnitude of controlled force without tearing itself apart. They were wrong. 3 days later, the ENS Archangel tore itself into real space above our homeworld, slamming into orbit with a thrum that resonated through our atmospheric sensors. It was ugly, brutally so. Human ships looked less like constructs and more like survivors. Metal patched atop metal, scorches sealed with whatever alloy they had on hand, plating hand-welded as if the universe kept trying to kill them and they simply refused to stay dead. We expected weapons primed, threats issued, dominance asserted. That was what powerful species did. That was what every apex empire in the galaxy had done since the dawn of starflight. But the humans hailed us with curiosity. Their greeting was warm, clumsy, disarmingly earnest. They apologized for startling us. They asked permission to enter orbit. They even offered to share the scan data they collected on the way in, as if the act of punching through hyperspace with force sufficient to bruise spacetime was a casual inconvenience. Yet beneath their politeness, something coiled, something ancient, something that watched everything with the cold caution of a species that had survived predators older than language. When their shuttle descended through our clouds, my breath locked in my mandibles. The hatch lowered, a figure stepped out, unarmored, unshielded, exposed to a world they had never breathed from, trusting our air to be kind to their fragile lungs. No creature of sense did that, not in the galaxy we knew. The human captain scanned the horizon, then smiled, and it was like watching a dormant star flare to life. Not bright, not blinding, merely dense, concentrated, a presence with gravity of its own. Scholars around me murmured theories. But none of those details unnerved me. What did was the feeling that this creature, this human, looked at our world, our armies, our defenses, and felt no fear. Not arrogance, not superiority, just a quiet, measured readiness, as though danger was not something they avoided, but something they expected. We led them through our capital. They admired our architecture, asked questions about our culture, expressed delight at the crystalline gardens. Their wonder was genuine, and I found myself liking them despite my unease. Still, the fragments of history echoed in my mind. Silent ruins on the galactic rim, extinguished empires no one could explain, ancient battlefields without survivors. For millennia, we had blamed extinction events, cosmic storms, natural causes. But as I watched the humans walk our halls with the relaxed poise of creatures forged in catastrophe, a terrible possibility took root. What if these were the descendants of the storms? What if the galaxy's mysterious vanishings were not mysteries at all, merely the forgotten consequences of provoking a species that did not lose? As the Archangel's delegation departed, the captain clasped my shoulder in farewell, a gesture of friendship among their kind. But beneath the warmth of their palm, I felt scars, thick, layered, a history written not in ink, but in surviving the impossible again and again. They said they wished for partnership. They said they came in peace. And I believed them. But as their ship vanished into the upper atmosphere and the ground steadied beneath my feet, a chill crawled down my carapace, one I would feel again years later when the galaxy learned what humanity truly was. For even then, on the day we welcomed them, I sensed a truth woven beneath their smiles. Humanity is kind. until you harm what is theirs. And the stars had no idea what that meant. Vega I-9 always smelled faintly of citrus and morning rain. I remember that detail because it was the first thing that struck me every time I stepped off the shuttle ramp, the scent of engineered orchards mingling with the colony's ocean winds. It made the world feel young, alive, hopeful, a place where the future had finally decided to plant roots. If the galaxy had a heart, Vega I-9 was meant to be it. Humans, concordant citizens, and species barely a decade removed from pre-industrial life walked the same streets. Children raced through the plazas speaking a chaotic symphony of 14 languages. Human engineers taught my people's mineral casters how to stabilize joints in high humidity. My people taught human botanists how to coax alien soil into bearing fruit. Even the artificial sunrise, tuned to a spectrum comfortable for every species, felt symbolic, light calibrated to unity. And through it all, humans thrived. They always thrived. Harsh gravity, they adapted. Toxic flora, they cataloged antidotes within weeks. Cultural complexity, they embraced it like a challenge issued by the universe itself. Looking back, perhaps that was the seed of doom. The Korth Dominion hated anything that flourished without their permission. The first sign of attack came in orbit, a cluster of sterile, silent blips on my academic console. Not merchant vessels, not diplomatic envoys, warships. Korth sterilization craft, their hulls blackened by the fumes of 1,000 burned worlds. No warnings, no declarations, just descent. I remember running into the street as shadows crossed the clouds. Human families were already ushering alien children toward shelters. My own colleague, a human linguist named Mara, shoved me behind a bulkhead before sprinting back into the open to pull 2 hatchlings to safety. The bombardment began. Structures vaporized into white fire. Streets buckled. The marketplace, where we had shared meals only days before, detonated in a cascade of broken glass and splintered stone. Yet everywhere I looked, humans were positioning themselves between danger and anyone smaller than them. A human father braced himself over a young Selk child as debris rained upon their shielding arms. A team of engineers, their faces streaked with soot, rigged the colony's power relays to explode, buying seconds, mere seconds, against the advancing ground troops. The detonations tore through the Dominion's armored walkers, slowing the assault long enough for evac shuttles to break atmosphere. But the moment that still haunts me, etched into the Galactic archives forever, came from a ranger stationed at the eastern perimeter. Her suit had been breached. She was bleeding out, half crushed beneath a collapsed auto turret. The feed crackled, shaky, grainy. That message reached every emergency relay, every surveillance archive, every civilian handheld, every human soul. And then she died. The Korth celebrated. I imagined their commanders raising their toxin-filled goblets, congratulating themselves on erasing a minor colony before it could become a threat. Their culture understood cruelty, efficiency, dominance, but not consequence. They thought Vega Ninth was a strategic loss for humanity. They failed to realize Vega Ninth was home, not territory, not a bargaining chip, not an outpost on a map. A place where humans had planted gardens, raised children, built sanctuaries for species the galaxy had forgotten. A place where they had created peace, true peace, not by decree, but by living it. The Korth had not attacked a settlement. They had stabbed a sleeping giant through the heart. We, those of us who survived, knew the Dominion's miscalculation the moment the smoke settled. The moment the fires dimmed, the moment silence claimed the ruins. I remember, standing amid the ash of the marketplace, wind carrying the faint scent of charred citrus, and understanding with sudden clarity. The Korth had signed their extinction warrant. But none of us, not even the scholars who had studied humanity's rise with obsessive detail, could predict the scale of the response that would follow. The precision, the fury, the cold, unbearable focus. No one could foresee what Earth would unleash upon the stars. No one could imagine that in answering Vega 9th's fall, humanity would change the shape of the universe. There are moments in galactic history when silence becomes a living thing, heavy, deliberate, waiting with predatory patience. The days after Vega 9th became such a moment. Every species, every empire, every scholar who had ever studied humanity's strange, relentless nature felt it. Humans were quiet, and that was worse than rage. The concordance sent condolences. Neighboring nations issued condemnations. Even the machine collectives transmitted offers of forensic support. Earth replied to none of them, not one. Instead, their diplomats withdrew. Their councils closed their chambers. Civilian networks went dark. Human space became unnervingly still, like the air before a planetary storm. Those of us who had lived alongside their kind recognized the signs. Humanity was not deliberating. They were deciding. And then the transmission arrived. 4 words, delivered directly to the Korth Dominion's War Council. We are coming. The Korth laughed, broadcasting the footage of their amusement across half their controlled territories. They called humanity melodramatic, soft, incapable of real retaliation. No one else laughed. I was in the Concordance War Archives when the first classified signatures ignited across our sensors. Slipspace ruptures, thousands of them, unfolding like blooming wounds across human-controlled sectors. But these were not standard military vessels. These were the ships we were not supposed to know existed. Dark hulls that swallowed radar, engines that left no wake, weapon arrays hidden behind gravitational shrouds so thick they bent local physics around them. Humanity had always claimed they maintained only a modest defensive navy. That day, the lie peeled away like burned skin. But it was the flagship that froze my blood, the UNS Nemesis. It did not exit slipspace so much as tear it open, unfolding into Korth-controlled space with the slow inevitability of a celestial event. No wasted movement, no escort. Its silhouette resembled a singularity wearing armor, curved plating like the ribs of some void-dwelling titan. The sudden spike in gravitational readings alone crippled several Korth outposts. Gravity wells snapped like overstressed tendons. Star charts warped. The Dominion scrambled its fleets. The Nemesis did not move. It simply opened a channel. Her commander, Admiral Reyes, stood on the bridge, posture utterly still, expression carved from the kind of grief that simmers long enough to crystallize into purpose. Her voice carried no anger, no tremor, only truth. Vega 9 was under our protection. I've never heard a more terrifying calm. Before the Korth could respond, before their fleets completed formation, before their planetary shields finished cycling, the star died. Not explosively, not chaotically. Humans do not lash out. They calculate. A stellar lance fired from within the Nemesis, a beam not of energy, but of controlled collapse. It pierced the system's sun at its pole and triggered an artificial implosion. The star folded inward like soft metal, density multiplying, fusion compressing until its core snapped into a micro-quasar pulse. A controlled supernova, a weaponized singularity, a sun turned into a blade. Light didn't simply radiate, it erupted. A wave of white fire vaporized Korth shipyards in milliseconds. Orbital rings liquefied. Entire fleets became glittering dust drifting through dead space. Planets blistered, atmospheres ignited, and the Korth throne world, once a fortress of black stone and armored spires, became a molten glass sphere cooling in silence. Billions of lives, centuries of empire, gone in the time it takes a human heart to beat. The galaxy witnessed the footage live. The screams, the vacuum-silenced shockwave, the moment when the lance's afterglow washed across the void like a second dawn. No one look away. No one could look away. And then the part that no one predicted. Humanity didn't celebrate. They didn't make a declaration of victory. They didn't carve monuments. They didn't broadcast triumphal speeches. Their fleets did not linger to gloat. Her armadas returned to Vega Ninth's ruins, not as conquerors, not as warriors, as mourners. I watched drones and infantry sift through the ash, recovering remains with a tenderness that made my throat tighten. Human medics carried shattered bodies, human, alien, all of them, with reverence. They rebuilt a temporary sanctuary where names could be spoken, lullabies sung, goodbyes whispered. And when the last body was recovered, when the last ember of the colony's fire cooled, the fleets turned away. Not to invade the Dominion's remaining territories, not to conquer a wounded empire, but simply to leave. Earth spoke only once more, broadcasting it galaxy-wide. We do not seek war. In that moment, every empire, Concordance, Machine Collective, Independent Merchant League, even the great hive civilizations, understood the truth we had failed to see. Humans are not expansionists. Humans are not conquerors. Humans are not predators of other species. Humans endure, relentlessly, grievously, unbreakably. They do not destroy unless forced. But if you threaten their home, their families, their children, they will rewrite astronomy to answer you. I remember the glow of the dead star fading on the archival screens, leaving only void in its wake. And in that darkness, the galaxy learned to fear a species that had never asked to be feared. A species that wanted only peace and would unmake suns to protect it. In the days following the annihilation of the Korth star system, the galaxy behaved like an organism in shock. Trade routes froze, militaries stood down. Even pirate clans retreated into uncharted nebulae, unwilling to risk brushing against the species that had just rewritten stellar physics in the name of their dead. And so, the Concordants came to Earth, not as accusers, but as supplicants. I was among the delegation. My mandibles clicked in silent tension as our shuttle descended through layers of Terran cloud, each denser than the last, until the blue planet's surface emerged beneath us. Cities glimmered not with excess, but with resilience. Rivers redirected, coastlines rebuilt from ancient climate scars, towers reinforced against storms. Everything I saw whispered a single truth. Humans did not grow powerful in peace. They learned strength from surviving their own world. We expected anger when we arrived at the Terran assembly, threats, cold declarations of sovereignty, demands for tribute or obedience. Instead, the human representatives who entered the chamber looked hollowed, sleepless, draped in the quiet ache of fresh morning. The lead envoy, a broad-shouldered Terran with silvering hair and eyes that had seen too much, listened in silence as our Counseloria delivered carefully measured questions. When he finally spoke, it was not with fire. It was with grief. He asked, his voice so level it made every one of us still our breathing. We sent farmers to Vega 9, teachers, families. We wanted new beginnings. No threat, no rage, just a statement carried on the weight of unbearable truth. It was far worse than fury. Later, we met the survivors. The room felt too small for the stories told within it. A human mother sat with her hands clasped around a small toy, some kind of soft creature with button eyes. She spoke in a voice that tried to be steady, but fractured at the edges. "I held this for 3 hours," she whispered. An engineer showed us scars on his palms, abrasions from digging through rubble bare-handed, refusing to stop even as their fingernails split and bled. A soldier, armor still scorched, stared at the table while recounting how his unit landed seconds too late. I could hear them on the comms. We were in orbit. Orbit. Every testimony sank into us like gravitational weight. The survivors did not seek sympathy. They did not speak to justify retaliation. They spoke because for the first time, we asked what humanity felt. And the truth was devastating. Humanity had not destroyed the Korth star system for conquest. They had not done it to cement dominance. They had not even done it for revenge. They had done it because something fundamental to their nature had been violated. Not land, not resources, not pride, community. Across their biology, across their history, across every cultural fragment we had ever studied, the concept of home held a reverence bordering on sacred. The colony at Vega 9 had not been an outpost. It had been a family. When the Concordance proposed sanctions against the shattered remnants of the Dominion, humanity refused. "No more death," the envoy said quietly. "Let what happened stand." It wasn't mercy. It wasn't cruelty. It was understanding. The Korth had been erased not because humanity sought to dominate, but because humanity could not allow anyone, anything, to make a graveyard out of a place they loved. As our delegation prepared to depart Earth, I found myself lingering at the assembly windows, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The human envoy joined me, his expression unreadable. "You think we're apex predators," he murmured, "but we're not." In that moment, I finally understood. Humans were not born the galaxy's apex species. They were shaped by catastrophe, tempered by loss, refined by 1 billion years of endurance. And even when they wielded power capable of cracking suns, they mourned more deeply than any species I had ever known. Humanity's transformation after Vega 9 was not what the galaxy expected. Many believed the destruction of a star system marked the beginning of a Terran empire, an age of conquest written in stellar fire. But when the shock faded and diplomatic channels reopened, a different reality emerged. Humanity sought not dominion, but responsibility. Nations, alliances, and independent worlds pleaded for Earth's protection, fearing that the Dominion's collapse would unleash chaos. Pirate federations, slaver clans, and warlord factions moved quickly to fill the power vacuum. The Concordance struggled to maintain order until humanity proposed the Galactic Peacekeeper Accord. They offered no annexations, demanded no tribute. Instead, they sent peacekeeper detachments to threatened worlds, trained civilian defense units, and equipped vulnerable colonies with shields, medical stations, and evacuation protocols. Their fleets patrolled not as conquerors, but as guardians, bound by strict humanitarian doctrine. The galaxy soon discovered that humanity's reputation did most of the work. Places once plagued by raids suddenly found tranquility. Criminal cartels avoided systems marked with the peacekeeper emblem. Even former enemies, resentful yet terrified, chose cooperation over resistance. And the most astonishing stories came from those rescued by human hands. A Korth hatchling orphaned by the quasar pulse was adopted aboard a Terran vessel. Her memoir would later capture what the galaxy could not comprehend. "They destroyed my star, yet they saved my life." Humanity had proven something profound. Their rage could end systems. Their compassion could rebuild galaxies. And the Peacekeeper Accord, born from ashes, became the template for a new era of interstellar stability. In the decades following the destruction of the Korth star system, the quasar pulse event carved a wound into space-time itself, an astronomical scar that refused to fade. Its residual radiation echoed through subspace like the fading toll of some celestial bell. Yet of all the species who journeyed to the drifting glass sphere that had once been the Korth throne world, humanity was conspicuously absent. They spoke of the place only as a graveyard, a wound they were unwilling to reopen. Veterans of the Vega 9 response refused interviews. Families of the lost treated the system as a closed chapter, too heavy, too sacred, too painful. But the galaxy did not forget. The annihilation of the star system became a defining historical fulcrum. Armies cited it as the reason to avoid unnecessary wars. Former enemies used it to teach their young the cost of provoking the Terrans. Yet scholars like myself uncovered the quieter truth beneath the legend. The humans did not act out of conquest, nor cruelty, nor dominance. They acted out of grief. Devastating, protective, all-consuming grief. 10 years after the event, a human captain visited my archive. The dead sun remained a threat to tyrants, a warning to aggressors. But to humanity, it was something far heavier. A promise written in starlight and sorrow. Never again. Unless we must. I have lived long enough to witness empires collapse, alliances fracture, and entire species fade into footnotes. Yet nothing in my centuries of study compares to the transformation that followed Vega 9. Historians now call it Pax Humanum. Not a reign, nor an era of dominance, but a settled quietness, a collective exhale the galaxy did not know it needed. It did not begin with declarations, it began with absence. The absence of warships in contested zones, the absence of raiders along supply routes, the absence of fear in the voices of frontier children. For the first time in generations, we slept without listening for alarms. The Peacekeeper Accord spread first through frightened worlds, then hopeful ones, then simply sensible ones. Human detachments arrived not as governors, but as guardians. Where they landed, violence dwindled, markets reopened, schools reformed, and as the years layered upon themselves, one truth became undeniable. Humanity did not stabilize the galaxy with threats. They stabilized it by showing what peace looked like. I remember walking through the Central Interstellar Academy on Heliox, a sprawling campus where 13 species taught side by side. Human instructors smiled with that disarming earnestness unique to their kind, a mix of weariness and unbreakable optimism. Their cadets trained not for conquest, but for rescue missions, relief logistics, and conflict de-escalation. They taught us something profound. Peace is not passive. It is maintained through effort, sacrifice, and a vigilance that does not waver. Human influence spread in ways no empire had ever achieved, because it did not expand through territory, it expanded through ideas. Their art was obsessed with survival, rebirth, the stubbornness of hope. Their diplomacy prioritized listening before speaking. Their explorers charted unclaimed corridors not to plant flags, but to find neighbors. Yet even as they inspired, they remained shadowed by a memory the galaxy could not shake: the dead star. Every negotiation with a Terran envoy carried its echo. Every despot reconsidered ambitions when they remembered how easily a sun had been turned inside out. Even the most peaceful worlds maintained a respectful distance from the line humanity had drawn, not out of fear of their armies, but out of fear of what might awaken if they were ever pushed again. But in their presence, in their daily choices, humanity proved something that contradicted the legend. They were not addicted to power. They were burdened by it. I once asked a human peacekeeper why their species didn't leverage their reputation to seize control. And there it was. Humanity was not the galaxy's apex because they were the strongest. They were its anchor because no one else could endure the weight. As the decades passed, peace became culture. Interstellar festivals bloomed, alliances transformed into communities, former enemies became collaborators. Even the scattered remnants of the Korth found footholds in humanitarian programs, no longer feared but guided. And I spent my life chronicling every shift, every ripple, every fragile miracle. After all my research, after all my encounters with Terrans, from the scarred veterans to the wide-eyed explorers, I reached a conclusion so simple it startled me. Humanity is not the galaxy's strongest species, nor the smartest, nor the bravest. They are simply the species that refuses to surrender, to despair, to extinction, or to the cruelty of those who prey on the innocent. They stand because they choose to stand, and because they stand, the rest of us have learned to stand with them. The galaxy remembers the dead star, yes, an impossible wound carved into the void, a reminder of what they are capable of when pushed beyond their limits. But it remembers something brighter, the light that came after, The dawn humanity carried with them wherever they walked, and in that dawn we found not fear, but a future.